Alright, so we're starting Chapter 5 in Algebra 2, and in 5.1 we're dealing, well, in all of Chapter 5 we're dealing with quadratic equations, and that's the one with x squared in the equation, and we're going to find different ways to solve it and different methods. You'll be able to know which ones, and you'll be able to find one, some are more comfortable than the other. We're going to start with graphing the quadratic functions. I know you guys don't like graphing, and you're not going to do it as your primary way. It's just to understand quadratic functions and how they work and how we solve the problem. So 5.1 and 5.2 are going to be predominantly graphing. So before we can graph, we need to understand quadratic equations a little bit more. So here's an example of quadratic equation, f of x, which is y, equals ax squared. This right here, the quadratic term, the one with the x squared, that tells us that it is a quadratic equation. Plus bx, this is the linear term, okay, this is the one with just the x, and then plus c, this is the constant term, alright? If I were to put a 0 in both of these x's, and whatever is left over here, because this doesn't have a 0, this would give me the y-intercept. So that's where it would cross the y-intercept, the line, okay? So the graph of a quadratic function, because it's a squared, will give us a parabola. So it's basically a U-shaped graph, which you've seen before. Now the very bottom, from when it stops going down and starts going up, or in any case this one is going down, so it's, it changes positions. To create that U, that bottom top is called the vertex, alright? And that line that cuts it in half is called the axis of symmetry. Now the axis of symmetry is important because on that line it's equal distance. So from this point here is equal distance to the same corresponding point on the other side. Basically you fold them and they overlap, hence the term symmetry. Okay, so that's the axis of symmetry. And this right here is the equation of the axis of symmetry, which is very important. And basically, if I take this and b is a coefficient in front of the x and a is a coefficient in front of the x squared, so that's where we get those letters, this also gives me the first term of my vertex, the x. Okay? And once I find that, I can plug that back into the equation and look for f of x, which is my y. Okay? So again, to find my vertex, I would find the axis of symmetry, which would be the x of my equation, and then the y would be, I take this, I plug it back in, solve for this, and whatever my answer is, my f of x, that's my y, and that's the equation of my vertex. It's important to find the vertex first, because when I find the vertex, then I can, when we're doing graphs of lines, you usually do what numbers? -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Do you remember that? Well, in this case, if you do that, sometimes you'll end up with just this part of the line. You see, if I did it right here, I just end up with this part of the line and not the whole U. Because with the line, as long as you got 2 points, you have the line. But with the U-shaped, it's a little bit more difficult. So if I find the vertex, then I know exactly which one. So once I find the vertex, I can use a few numbers before it and a few numbers after it, and I make sure that I get that U-shape that I'm looking for. Now, one last thing that I'm looking for is the minimum and the maximum. Basically, I need to know if this parabola is facing up or if it's facing down. If it's facing up, then that means it has a low point, which is the vertex, which is the minimum. This is the minimum, okay? The maximum would be if it was facing downwards. Do you see that? And it's basically the high point, which is the y of the vertex. So this would tell me right here my maximum or minimum number, okay? It tells me on my y what's the highest or the lowest, and it matters. If a, that means this number is a positive, then I have a U-shape going up. If a is less than 0, so if it's a negative, then it's a U-shape going down, and instead of a minimum, I end up with a maximum. So go ahead and pause this, do the vocabulary, write this down, and we have one example, and you're all free to go. Alright, so the first example we're going to do is this equation, f of x equals 2 minus 4x plus x squared. Now these are a little out of order, okay? I want the x squared first, so I'm going to rewrite it just so you can see which order it's supposed to be. I need the x squared first, so x squared, because it's a positive, leave it positive, then minus 4x plus 2, alright? This right here, the number in front, this is my a, this is my b, negative 4, this whole thing, and this is my c. So my y-intercept is basically my c, so that means my y-intercept right here equals 2, okay? My axis of symmetry, if you remember that equation, it's y equals, okay, y equals negative b over 2a. So my b is negative 4. This is my axis of symmetry. So negative 4 over 2 times a, which is 1. So negative and negative is positive, so 4, 2 times 1 is 2. So this gives me 2. So that means my vertex, the x-axis is 2. So 2 is going to be my middle number. So if you remember, we're going through the u. So it says here on 2, right here, I'm going to pick 2 numbers this way and 2 numbers this way. It has a minimum, right, because it's facing up, because my a is a positive. So it has a minimum. So here are my 3 answers. Y-intercept, axis of symmetry, and minimum. Alright? So I'm going to choose 2. Here's 2. I'm going to choose 2 numbers before 2. So I'm going to do 1 and 0 and 2 numbers after 2, which is 3 and 4. So again, I'm not doing the typical negative 2, negative 1. This tells me what numbers I need to choose. I put this number in the middle, and I choose 2 before it and 2 after it, and those are my numbers. And in here is the equation I'm going to use. X squared minus 4x plus 2. So let's solve this. 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 2 gives me 0, 0, 0 plus 2. This gives me 2. Okay? We have 1 squared minus 4 times 1 plus 2, which gives me 1 minus 4 plus 2, right? 1 minus 4 is negative 3, plus 2 is negative 1. Alright? Next one is 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 2, which gives me 2 times 2 is 4, minus 8 plus 2. 4 minus 8 is negative 4, plus 2 is negative 2. Yes? 4 minus 8 is, yes. And then we have 3 squared minus 4 times 3 plus 2. This gives me 9 minus 12 plus 2. We have 9 minus 12 is negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. And finally we have 4 squared minus 4 times 4 plus 2, which would give me 4 squared is 16 minus 16 plus 2. 16 minus 16 is 0, plus 2 is 2. So my answer here is 2. So let's graph. Alright? I'm going to take the one is 0, 2. It's my first one. Then 1, negative 1. Then 2, negative 2. Then 3, negative 1. And then 4, positive 2. So you can see here that this right here is my vertex. it's this one right here, 2, -2. And this right here is my axis of symmetry. This, because I have this, is my minimum. Alright? So once you have the setup, you just plug it in, put it in, figure out what each one is, solve. I have this middle chart just so that you can work out. Make sure you do show your work. Go ahead and try page 241, number 4, page 241, number 4, and I will see you in class.